Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show, we're talking about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of The Passage, as well as the latest episode of Manifest. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when to start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about the series premiere of The Passage, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Manifest. But the first thing I want to talk about is the series premiere of The Passage, a great premiere. I actually, going into this, I thought I knew a little bit because I actually watched the trailer like a couple months ago, but I'd actually kind of forgotten a lot about it. And I was under the impression, I even said this recently, like when I did this month's watch list, I thought this was a zombie show, like the whole thing that was going on. Turns out it's a vampire show. Had no idea. I even looked into it a little bit, before the show premiered and everything, and just because it's actually based on books, and I read a line from it. I was like, I went back because I was like, oh, that line that like I read kind of was super spoilers, so I won't talk about it at all. But it's actually based off like a trilogy of books. But it's such an interesting thing. Nevertheless, that took me by surprise. I was like, oh, vampires. I didn't even love that doctor later on. It's like, yeah, I know we're trying to stick away. He's a blood-sucking monster. I know we don't want to use the word vampire, which is kind of interesting. I like that too because it's that situation, because it's that same thing as The Walking Dead, where it's like, oh yeah, like, and no one calls them zombies. It's like, oh yeah, like almost like it's in this world where it's like zombie doesn't exist, that tons and tons of zombie media doesn't exist. It's like, no, in this world they acknowledge the fact is that vampires, well, I mean, at the very least, that they are familiar with vampires are, but I guess it's because they don't want to go that far, because it's like, oh, vampires are, what would you say, they're fiction, and this is something else. This is a whole breed of science. So that's the whole thing. But it's kind of interesting that dude Tim got bit, and that whole situation evolves into a whole interesting situation. It's really interesting that Jonas, played by Henry Ian Cusick, I did not know he was in this show. Like, maybe he popped up in the trailer, but I didn't remember. And I was like, hey, what's up with that? I was like, hey, that's so cool. Also, like, the main actor playing Brad is Mark Paul Gosselaar, I guess is how you pronounce it. Like, I always feel like I'm butchering his name. Obviously, like Zach from Saved by the Bell, Franklin and Bash. He actually did another show recently. Well, not recently, but it was like a year or two ago. It was like a baseball TV show on Fox. So I think that's kind of interesting. And kind of along the same lines, I think it's kind of interesting because Amy was watching an episode of Bob's Burger, and I was like, I always wonder about that. Like, you have to pay licensing money for, not licensing money, like what other type of money would, you have to pay money for that type of stuff. I wonder, is that okay when it's on the same network? Considering they're both Fox shows, do they not really have to pay for it? Because it's kind of like, you can do it because you're on the same network, or maybe the prices are a little bit. It was just something that kind of crossed my mind, because you see that from time to time. Like, anytime something pops up like that, you're like, I never think about it, but you have to go, they had to pay for that, didn't they? It's like, I wonder how much it costs to do that. Nevertheless, that's going on for a huge tangent. But it's interesting because I was wondering, because I thought their whole, like the whole what I soon found out was a vampirism thing. I thought that was what it was. It's like, oh, we're trying to stop this from spreading. It's like, and why we need a little girl. It's like, no, apparently there's like a bird flu spreading in, what I think it said was China, I think. And it was killing a lot of people, and it was spreading very fast. And it's like, okay, the CDC's trying to figure out what you do about that, but Project Noah is the one that's like, they go to. Like, that's what this whole thing is. It seems like Project Noah is just kind of like a subdivision of kind of like, it seems like it is in general, like the DOD, Department of Defense, is kind of special project, and it involves all of this. So, because basically one of the scientists is like, hey, let's take this vampirism thing and we can apply it, because it's like, it seems like at first when it comes to it, like everything seems normal, like you get accelerated healing and stuff like that, but eventually the body starts to decay and get all like veiny and like discolored like everyone else's is. But it seems like the younger the person is, the slower the decline is. There was that lady in particular, like I think the doctor was like, it took her like 28 days to decline, and she maintains her human complexion. She looks like a normal human. I also talked about the fact of the matter is that there's no brain. The brain functions a little different. It's not necessarily brain function. I forgot what the exact wording he used was that basically because Clark was kind of suggesting like, oh, maybe there's something there, but he was like, no, all that's just reflexes, that there's nothing there. But what's interesting is like, there was a dude that was explaining to Jonas. He was like, yeah, I had a dream about Tim, he was telling me that he, dreamed about going home and that he's going to take me with him and everything like that. And he's even talking about other people have talked about having nightmares. Have you? And Jonas was like, oh, you must be, cabin fever, kind of being locked up in here with them for so long. But it's like, at first I was like, oh, is that like some kind of form of compulsion or something like that? I was like, you had to have met them like face to face or something like that. I guess if you locked eyes with them long enough, you'll get the compulsion. But then later on, Tim got inside of Carter's head. At first I was about to go, whoa, that's crazy that he just managed to get out and he's making himself look human and stuff like that. But it's like, no, the fact is that it seems like they're just it seems like they're psychic vampires, which is interesting because I doubt he actually met with Carter, because Carter, Anthony, that dude knew nothing about what was going on. So it's like they must be able to like psychically attach to anyone or something. Like that's kind of interesting because I feel like psychic abilities as a vampire is like, that's why I was kind of thinking it was compulsion, because the lady got inside of Clark's head. I was like, well, you stare at each other's eyes long enough, not unless Tim actually locked eyes with him. But I feel like they wouldn't have made him meet at that point, once again, because Anthony didn't know what was going on. So it's kind of interesting for him to get inside of his head like that. So I think that speaks volumes about, maybe it's just because Tim has been one longer, and he's been one at least 3 years. So the longer you are one, the more control over the abilities you have. Potentially, it depends on when that lady got turned too, because it's like I said, it affects different people differently. Once again, it comes down to age and stuff like that, and that's why they want Amy, because they want to infect her with it so they can create a cure. They want to like modify it so that you don't have to worry about the side effects. So Amy, being young as she is, she naturally potentially won't have any side effects because of the science that says that, because she has a whole bunch of neurons, and that's what this thing kind of latches onto. So it's like start with her and then experiment from there to try and get rid of all the side effects so that it could spread and be used to help other people, and not just with this bird flu is coming, but get rid of all diseases from hurting people. So it's a situation of like, oh, it's kind of for the greater good, but just kind of going about it kind of an evil way. The doctor has reservations about it, but she goes through with it, the same thing for Clark, which is kind of interesting that they kind of have a thing going on. I wonder, was that always a thing, or is it just over this Project Noah that they became a thing? Is it even really a thing, or is it just kind of we hook up every once in a while? It might not be like we're serious type of thing. It's just kind of like maybe there was something there before, but I kind of got that feeling when he was like, oh, I knew exactly where you were. It's my job to know where everyone is. But I felt like, oh, there was something there. But then, like, hooking up later on, I was like, that confirmed it. But like I said, is that, like, them hooking up because it's like, oh, like, what we're dealing with, trying to kidnap this little girl and everything, which Amy's story is super sad because it's like, oh, yeah, like, her mom literally died 3 days ago from an overdose. And obviously she's not taking it well because she keeps going like, oh, my mom's a junkie. And Brad being like, hey, you need to let some of that anger go because anger's poison and affected. That was kind of interesting too. Like, I wasn't expecting the relationship to kind of be what it ended up being. Like, I knew it would get there, but it kind of surprised me because it's just kind of like, and you gotta understand why, because he had a daughter himself, but it seems like he lost her, and him and his ex-wife are like, they still care about each other, but it seems like Brad kind of left her behind. Like, once his daughter died under whatever circumstances, whatever it was, because Lila's like, it's not your fault. I will tell you that for as long as it takes for you to hear it so that you believe it. But whatever it happened, he blames himself. And so I guess he just cut himself away from his life. I don't know. Maybe that led to him going into the military. We don't know how long ago. Like, because probably Amy's probably the same age as his daughter when she died. So that's probably why he's even more protective of, because once Phil hit her, like, Brad lost it, just because it's like, kids are a touchy subject for him just because he lost his own kid and everything. And like I said, seeing Amy out here in the world alone, not really having anyone, which you can't forget, also major props to her for being as smart as she is, because she's like, oh, you here? Why wouldn't they send a social worker with you, and a lady in particular, to talk to me? So it was like, yeah, she's no idiot. She kind of quickly figures stuff out. But, and even Phil getting pissed because it's like, wait a minute, she's getting to sit in the front. I'm sitting to get like animal crackers for her and something to drink, just because she's car sick and stuff like that. So it's like, he was kind of upset because it's like, no, this is a job we have to do. Interesting enough, Zach Appleman, also from another Fox show, being Sleepy Hollow, which I'm blanking on his character's name. It's going to bother the crap out of me. It's the same thing as Clancy Brown's character's name, but I'm blanking on his name too. It's been a while, But nevertheless, I was wondering, it's like, because he has, like, I didn't see y'all in the previews, and he seems the most about, like, yeah, let's get this job done type of thing. So I was like, how'd you get, oh, you just choked him out and left him. Okay, that's one way to handle that situation. But it's also interesting, too, how drastic they're willing to go to this extreme with everything. But to be fair, I guess it kind of makes sense, because Clark was like, yo, dude, do this job because you don't want the people we're working for to kind of come after you. Because, once again, because this is a DOD situation of, like, and this is their little side project, and if word kind of gets out about what they're doing and what they're up to, even the fact is they're trying to get, like, a little girl kidnapped so they can experiment on her, yeah, it's not going to come off that nicely. I even like how Brad tried to handle it, though. He tried to go to, like, the cops to get arrested, but then he wanted to put Amy in front of television, so, like, if she's such a public thing, the DOD can't do anything. They'll have to leave her alone. But that did stop the guys from coming in there killing the sheriff. That took me by surprise. It's just like, I guess it's kind of do whatever you need to, we'll clean it up later, but we gotta handle this. I mean, they were literally told to handle Brad, because it's like, he might not know everything, but he's still a liability, because we can't have this turning into some big fiasco, which is turning into more and more of one with everything going down. So it is kind of interesting how the story is kind of told too, because it seems like it's told far in advance with what little bit I read about, like, what the story of the passage is. Like I said, reading from the book, like a little tiny description. Like I said, I read like one sentence and then I stopped because I was like, that's huge spoilers. But the fact of the matter is, it's interesting because it's like, you can tell this is told from her perspective of a future point in time. Like, she's retelling this story. So I think that's kind of an interesting storytelling purpose. Like, if I had to compare anything to it, it's a nerdy video game thing, but Final Fantasy X is told from that perspective too, where it's kind of like, the whole game, well, what, 90% of the game is Titus retelling the story from Xanarkin back. That whole thing. So, but I do like Brad, and like I was alluding to earlier, Brad and Amy's relationship with the whole thing of, like, she said something, he was like, whoa, watch your mouth and stuff like that. But then he's like, holy damn it, when she gets those shots. And he's just like, and he's so proud of her and everything. I thought that's kind of a pretty neat moment. And even he was kind of shocked. He's like, I need you to trust me. She's like, okay. He's like, wait, what? Really? She's like, well, yeah, come on. And it's like, for him, it kind of took him by surprise. But I think it's because, you know, the way he treated her, like, even though it's under these circumstances that she's like, yeah, I know I'm being kidnapped, but the fact of the matter is Brad looked after her. And I guess she kind of believed him. Like, because she knew some of his story was a lie, because it's like, oh, the doctor in Colorado, because you're potentially sick and stuff like that. She's like, I know it's a lie. And so I don't know if he's like, and even in that time frame of this episode, like even later on, I don't know if he explained everything to her, like who's after her and for what purposes and stuff like that. I mean, because the fact of the matter is, he can't explain it, because even he doesn't know all the details about what's going on. And so I think that'll probably be something we'll see going forward, like learning more about what Project Noah is all about, like what this is all, like is that about. So it's definitely going to be interesting kind of continuing forward, as like they literally are being hunted for their life while all this other stuff is happening back at the lab with the not vampires but vampires, because they are vampires, but the scientists once again don't want to just call them vampires. Whatever happened to the original Biker? We saw that Clark killed the original, but it's like, he was the original, but it's like, that was patient zero essentially. I guess you can make the argument Tim is technically patient zero, but it's like, are there others out there besides them? Because the way Amy kind of makes it phrase, it seems like this is how the world ends, essentially. So what's going on in that lab is obviously going to spread out. But I'm curious, like, are there any more out there already that are kind of a thing? Because I'm also curious, like, once again, I brought it up, like, the whole, like, them being potentially psychic. Like, what else is different about these vampires? They kind of have that Vampire Diaries situation. Well, Vampire Diaries Originals Legacy situation going on of, like, when they kind of go vampire, well, it seems like they stay in that mode forever, but like the way their face gets all veiny like that, it's like what they do, like how it looks in Vampire Diaries in that universe, but even more so. Like I said, they lose coloring in their face and body and stuff like that. It's also interesting too, because like we saw it with Tim, but the fact of the matter is he spit out his teeth at the beginning, so it's like, huh. So I guess that's supposed to represent, like, does it happen to all their teeth or just a few of their teeth, like the fang teeth they need? Where it seemed like a few of his teeth kind of popped out his mouth for his fangs to kind of grow in. Because it depends on what, you know, you go by. Because like vampires in Supernatural have like a whole, they have teeth that can kind of come and retract and like extend. So I'm curious, like, how does that work? Are they always extended? Because I always associate vampires of having teeth always extended. But and like I said, it comes down to the continuity and the lore of the vampirism. So I'm also curious. I'm assuming this is I don't know, because it's kind of like the same thing I talk about with Van Helsing, the TV show. It's like it's a fantasy show, but it has science fictional elements to it too. And that's what I'm curious about. This is like vampirism going to be like magic? Is it going to be science fiction? Like, which route are they going to go down? Or is it going to be ambiguous of being like, we're going to look at it from a science fictional point of view, where it started from? We might not ever cover that because that might not be the focus of it. It's just kind of like, it seems like Brad and Amy's story in particular. Amy's story seems to be like the big focus on it. So it's going to be interesting to see, like I said, where this all takes us and what direction the show potentially goes in. Like I said, that one line kind of spoils everything. Without really spoiling it, it's just kind of like, it puts it out there being like, something in my head, and I'm curious like how you get to that point. Like it just kind of got my brain rattling off in many different directions about like where everything will go. I'm curious like what we got. Well, the situation of Brad handling himself the way he is, obviously he is very skillfully trained. I also like the fact is that Leela has kind of got his back in all of this, because like Clark came to her and she was like on the phone with Brad and was kind of pretending otherwise, because like no matter what, because like she's getting married, she's trying to move on for her life, but she's kind of basically saying like, I will drop everything, all I want is for you to come back. But he can't forgive himself, and I guess like he feels like he can't go back to his old life because of what happened, and it's just she's trying to move on, but he can't quite move on. So like I said, what I was trying to say earlier, because I don't think I went into what I was trying to explain earlier, but it was like, I'm curious, like, did he, go into service and stuff like that after that happened? He probably did some military stuff beforehand. Maybe he went back for more tours after it happened, and she just hasn't seen him in that time frame. It seems like they probably talk here and there, but she did say it's been like 3 years because it's near their daughter's birthday. So like I said, I'm very interested to see, what this series has in store for us. I'm very excited to see what the next episode is what is it all going to be about. And now moving on to this week's episode of Manifest. Quite a few things we need to discuss about this episode. So this episode is actually kind of sad and depressing, obviously, because everything's revolving around Daily, because now we kind of got to more of an extent of what he was talking about before, about how everyone blamed him. Because that is the thing, it's like the plane disappeared for 5 years, and how are people going to blame you for that? It's like no matter who it is, whether it's like the rational people or even just the people with the crazy theories that like, oh, like we ended up on an island where everyone was cryogenically frozen, but I was the one who I took you to the island. Or aliens are involved, I'm an alien. So for him, it's just kind of like he didn't really have that much, contact with his wife and son before everything happened, but even more so afterwards, because everyone blamed him. Because like for the past 5.5 years, everyone's like, oh yeah, it was, it had to be on his side of things, because we kind of go back and we look at Vance's conversation with him, because Vance is like, yeah, you made all these, different turns and stuff like that, the way you handled it. But he was like, no, the way the storm was hitting, I had to do it because all those passengers' lives were in my hand. And so he kind of made it seem like, no, I kind of had no choice but to do that. But in the grand scheme of things, like, especially with the reports that came up saying like, no, it was just kind of a regular storm, that he shouldn't have handled it the way he did. Because, once again, getting back to what I was trying to say, is like, everyone thought they all died, like, 5.5 years ago, and it was all on his fault, pilot error, human error. But then it's like, nope, and now they've come back. It's like, oh, everything that went down, them disappearing and everything, that's 100% on him. And it's like, that's a lot to deal with. Everyone else's lives changed drastically since leaving and coming back, obviously, but his had the most drastic effect of like, he gets blamed for everything, which is sad, because at the end of the day, especially having seen what it was, it's like, that wasn't his fault. Even his co-pilot said the same thing of like, yep, wasn't his fault. Like, he handled that situation the best way he could, if it meant trying to make sure that everyone survived. The question I'm curious about, though, is if he had not flown through it, would things have ended up the way they did? Because it's something that comes up in conversation later on, because Fiona's kind of like, yeah, I don't think this was as accidental. Maybe we tapped into like the next evolution of humans and stuff like that. Once again, the way everything kind of seems, it seems like this might have been like some human experiment. But that's the thing, like, I don't know how humans or the government or, the major and all of them, like how they would have been able to reduce this situation. Maybe not necessarily that they created, but maybe they've been checking patterns and stuff like that, and they knew this was going to happen. And so they kept an eye on the flight that was going to pass through it. Maybe passing through it was all on Daily. Maybe if they hadn't passed through it, maybe something else happened. But because they did pass through it, they experienced what they experienced. Or maybe who's ever behind this grand conspiracy did plan for them to go through it. It seemed like that was more so on Daily's point of view. So I think it was just kind of they were hoping people pass through it. There'd be no problem. Not necessarily pass through it, but at least kind of get caught up in the remnants of it. So like maybe on some, I don't know. That's the big question of like, how much did they know ahead of time? Because the way the conversations have been lately, it's almost like, no, this is a big cover up of people knew it was going to go down and they're trying to cover their tracks. Because even later on, the meteorologist Roger kind of, because, well, before all that, Daily showed Ben the files and stuff like that about the simulations they ran. It wasn't like they're covering this stuff up after they left. It's like the moment what happened to their plane, they started immediately covering up, giving all this false information and stuff like that. Because Daily ran through multiple simulations over and over again, and none of them ended with, well, for one, none of them matched the same storm. And when they did finally get the same calculations from Roger and they ran the simulation, and when he ran through it the exact same way, none of the results ended the same way with them time traveling. It ended with them crashing, which I guess is very foreshadowing and stuff like that. But it's because there was something else at play there. It isn't just the storm itself, because the storm wasn't just some regular storm. He admits that it was a big storm and everything, but I think on some level he thinks it was something special about it. In particular, he thinks like, Fiona knew about it and stuff like that. But even Fiona at the end of the day was like, no, Daily is exactly like me. We're both victims kind of caught, because he's like, what happened to that flight is no more Daily's fault than it is mine. Like, the government took my research and did stuff with it, that I didn't even know that they would. And it's just kind of sad because Daily's starting to kind of become more and more unhinged because he's so desperate to clear his name, he's willing to do whatever it takes. And even going to his place and looking at everything, it made Ben kind of get like a different perspective on things, because he's like, is this what Grace sees when she sees me? But like Michaela trying to make it feel better, it's like, no, everything you do, like obviously Daily is just kind of going along unhinged. Everything you do is to protect Cal, even protect all of us, because for him it's like, Daily was doing the same thing where he was kind of obsessed with the work and everything, and he was looking into it, and it's that guilt. I mean, it's the same thing as that dude who ended up, killing himself. That was from the flight because he predicted people's deaths and stuff like that. Because he told people about everything, they ended up dying, and he thought that was all on him. That's still something we haven't circled back around to, whether it was just coincidence, which even that's like a heavy amount of coincidence, but. So there's that. So it's this great burden of like you when you feel so responsible, because he felt like, for Daily, it's like, if I can root out this conspiracy, then maybe it'll make up everything. Like I'll finally be at peace, and maybe I'll be able to clear my name, and everyone will look at me as a hero for the first time, because he was a hero because of him. I mean, who knows? If he hadn't flown directly into the storm, maybe things would have been worse. Maybe that's what the cover-up was. The fact of the matter is, they weren't meant to come back necessarily. Maybe it's supposed to be like the experiment was just kind of test and see what the weather patterns and stuff was like that, and kind of excuse what potentially might have gone wrong. But, or maybe they did know they were time travel. I highly doubt it. It seems like that was something that how could you account for that? So, but then there's like, like I said, it all stems back to the question of how much did they know and when type of situation. So I'm just so heartbroken that I was hoping like, come on, Daily, turn it around. No, he didn't. And him and Fiona died. And that's such a shame because for him, it's like he thinks Fiona was the one behind everything, thinking like, oh, like she had some part of it. I was wondering in the last second, was she going to reveal something? But it's like, no, she was an innocent person and mixed up all in this situation. And maybe that in the end of the day was why she never got into callings, because it just wasn't her. In the grand scheme of things, it's kind of like destiny and fate. Maybe things are always going to end up this way no matter what. It's like, it almost goes to the point of like, well, what's the point? Like, it's like, how much are they able to affect things and change things? Are certain things always meant to be and they can't change them? Like Daily's fate and Fiona's. I mean, there's a part of my brain that's like, it was a government out there sending out, flights and stuff like, jets and stuff like that. So it's like, they could have easily covered that up. They've covered up a lot of other stuff. So I'm like, what about that? I mean, that also kind of ties back to like the plane exploding and stuff like that. So they could have easily faked it and kept Fiona and Daily. That could be the case. I'm doubting it, but there's part of my brain that kind of wants that to be the case, because it's like it's such a shame, because it's like, once again, it's like Fiona didn't do anything wrong, and it's just kind of sad because Daly only got to that point just because of everything that kind of came about because of this. Though it did kind of get Ben walking away from the situation with a different perspective. So I think that was because Cal was telling him he had to help out the person from the plane. He assumed it was Daly, which it could have been, but I think maybe there was someone else at play here. I mean, to be fair, well, if we are going down that route, it could be a situation of like, hey, Daly and Fiona are alive and they are kind of experiments in this whole situation. Maybe, possibly. I doubt they actually did go to the future. I mean, no wreckage has been found at this point in time. Some people, the believers in all of this situation, are believing that he did manage to go to the future or something like that. I highly doubt that. It's either they're gone or this was another cover-up. We'll just have to wait and see. Like I said, majority of my brain is leaning towards gone, but I'm always hopeful and, thinking that there might be a little twist to that, but we'll see. What's also interesting about this, obviously, we're still continuing the awkwardness between Ben and Grace, and it's something I didn't even think about last episode, but it definitely, it comes up this episode, is because, like, Michaela's dealing with the whole Jared situation. She's trying to keep it at a distance because it's like, what we did was cheating. Like, she, once again, like I brought up before, she doesn't want to be the other woman, but once again, I bring it up to the fact is, it's kind of interesting considering the fact is, technically, Lorna's the other woman, and Michaela became the other woman, but she's back, so she's technically the original woman, kind of in it, making Lorna the other woman. That was kind of like the whole concern in the first place, I think. But Michaela doesn't want to go further with everything, because no matter how they feel in everything, it's like, what we had is fine. It was great, but we can't do that at the cost of the life that you already built with Lorna, because you love her, right? And it's like, yeah, it's like, I love her too. She's my best friend, just like she's your wife, and I refuse to kind of hurt her like that. But for Jared, it's kind of like, I've always loved you, and so what am I supposed to do? And it's like, I don't know a way out of that either. But it's kind of interesting because Grace is kind of trapped in a similar situation, trapped between Danny and Ben, which Michaela's like, I'm rooting for you and Ben. Ben loves you, and Grace is like, I love him too. I just hope it's enough. I think it's just stemming from the fact is that she thinks that he's going off on this crazy, thing that he's doing. Because even when Kyle's like, oh, he's helping people, she's like, yep, that's your dad, all right. Like, I guess for her, it's like, he's so concerned about other people instead of being concerned for her and their family. But to be fair, everything he does is not just for everyone. The main focus has always been Cal, her, and Olive. So, and what makes this situation even worse, everything that went down this episode falls even further on Autumn's shoulders. For one, she came to Michaela with all that BS. She's overhearing the conversation. Roger died because of her. You can blame the whole Daly and Fiona thing on her too, because Roger dying made Daly's, because he was already grasping at straws anyway. He was already suspicious of Fiona, but because of Roger dying, it just set his suspicions even further on Fiona. It's like, oh, like she knows. Like if Ben hadn't told her, maybe, he would have been able to convince her and be like, no, she didn't even know about Roger. I don't know if it would have changed anything, but she definitely pushed that situation forward. Like, before doing what she did, it was shitty, but now it's like, there are two people dead because of you. No matter what your circumstances are, like, I don't know what it is that Singularity or the government or whoever it is, like, we'll just call them Singularity for now, just because that's who we are dealing with at the forefront, or even the Major, like, what they have on her. But the fact of the matter is, it sucks that she's doing what she did. I mean, to be fair, at the end of the day, Michaela and Ben found her out for being the, mold that she is. It's actually interesting because she took a page out of Cal's sketchbook, and obviously it must have something to do with her. Either it has to deal with her future, or maybe it was a representation of her past. Maybe she did, whatever it is that the Major, Singularity, whoever's covering up for her, Cal must have drawn it. Because the moment she showed up there and was kind of looking at everything, like, Cal had kind of at one point looked at her in a way like, I think he knew more than he was kind of letting on. Because that's another thing too. Did Cal get kidnapped at the end of the episode, or did he go with them? Because it's hard to say, because Cal knows more than he's letting on. So did Autumn let spill? Like, because I don't know if Autumn necessarily knows what Cal knows, even if she showed the scrap, but maybe she didn't. I don't know. Maybe she would. Maybe she had second guesses and didn't tell him anything. Maybe Cal left on his own. Maybe Autumn came to him. I doubt it. Maybe he left to go find Autumn. I don't know. What's also interesting, because this all ties back to Michaela in the sense of not necessarily tying back, but also like the fact is Michaela is still getting the same calling she got last episode about find her. So it's like, What's that all about? We still don't know. We also still never found out whatever happened to Powell either, because he got taken last episode, so we still haven't seen the aftermath of that either. So there is a lot of complicated situations going forward from this. Like I said, it just kind of ended in a tragedy, and I'm curious to see where this all takes us going forward, because things are getting more desperate because Cal is potentially taken. I guess that's going to lead to Ben and Grace kind of coming back together even more, just because of the fact that Cal's in danger, and it's going to be a situation of maybe it's going to make her believe more. I mean, there's already the whole aspect of all those people who believe all this stuff anyway about them being special and all that, so it's most likely probably that's where Grace's mind might potentially go. I don't know. We're going to have to wait and see what ends up happening next episode with all of this. And also, what's Autumn going to do, because she, well, I guess they found what they needed, that being Cal, so they don't, they found their Holy Grail, so I guess they don't really need her undercover anymore. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens when they kind of track her down potentially. I'm sure like Michaela's and Jared might look into her more next episode, trying to find out who she really is, because like she brought up that whole thing about like fake identities and stuff like that. So I'm thinking on some level, maybe what she was telling Michaela wasn't 100% BS. Maybe it was stuff made up by the people she's working with, or maybe it's just some truth to it about like someone stealing her identity, doing all these terrible stuff. Like she's probably the one that stole someone else's identity and was doing terrible stuff until she got caught and everything. So like I said, we'll just have to wait and see. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.